Hello, everyone. Today, we begin in the shadows, not the metaphorical kind, but the literal ones, the ones cast by stone arches, oil lamps, and the looming silence of history. You're about to be born, not in a palace, not under starlight or prophecy, but in a cramped alley near the Aventine Hill, a place where the city of Rome breathes with a mix of sweat, wine, and whispered transactions. Drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time is it. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel. Dim the lights, find a comfortable position, and let's step gently into a world not found in history books, but in the warmth of forgotten bodies and the quiet rhythm of survival. You weren't born noble. You were born near the forge of human commerce, where every cry of a street vendor competed with the shouts of mothers and the clatter of carts. Your mother, young, exhausted, and ignored, delivered you into the arms of a midwife with rough hands and a sharp tongue. The birth was not marked by celebration, only relief. A girl again. Another mouth, another possibility, another worry. The room was small. Clay walls, straw on the floor. A single oil lamp flickered on a shelf above you, casting long shadows on the damp stone. It smelled of warm milk, dried herbs, and the faint musk of worry. Outside, Rome rumbled. Oxen snorted in their yokes. Fishmongers haggled. And somewhere, someone laughed with the weightless joy of not knowing what you now embodied. The fragility of a female life born without protection. As you cried your first breath, your mother's eyes didn't meet yours. They stared at the midwife, seeking confirmation that you would survive. That this wouldn't be another tiny burial under the tiled roof of a friend. But you were strong. Your lungs were fierce. You came into the world already fighting the noise, already part of the city's rhythm. In Rome, the birth of a boy meant potential, inheritance, citizenship, legacy. A girl meant future calculations. Could she be married off, sold, hidden, saved? The midwife muttered a short prayer to Venus and dipped her fingers into a bowl of olive oil before pressing them gently along your brow, drawing an invisible symbol of protection. Not that it would help much. The neighborhood was poor, but not the poorest. Close enough to the markets to smell roasted chestnuts in the morning, but far enough from the temples that no priest ever passed your doorway. People lived close, physically, emotionally, sometimes resentfully. Walls were thin. Secrets didn't last. Your earliest memories would form from texture. Rough cloth against your skin, the prick of straw, the soft pressure of your mother's chest as she rocked you, not out of joy, but to keep you silent so the neighbors wouldn't complain. Her lullabies were fragments, half-remembered tunes from her own childhood, shaped now by fatigue and necessity. By the age of 3, you were already aware of your surroundings in a way children shouldn't be. You knew which neighbors argued the most, which dogs barked at shadows, and which alleyways smelled worse after the rain. The world taught you early that attention was survival. At 5, you ran errands. Small things, bread, eggs, sometimes nothing at all. Just a walk to the fountain to feel water on your hands, to hear other voices, to imagine lives not your own. There was an old woman who sat by the cistern, selling roots and dried figs. She'd wink at you and say, "You'll be trouble one day." You didn't know what that meant. Not yet. By 7, your body began to change. Slowly, secretly. But the city noticed before you did. Men started to look longer, not with kindness, not like fathers. You learned to walk faster, to avoid eye contact, to make yourself small in places where smallness wasn't a choice but a shield. Your mother grew quieter over the years, wore more gray, smiled less. She was not unkind, just tired. Life had folded her inwards, like parchment worn thin. She worked when she could, begged when she couldn't. Sometimes she took in laundry. Sometimes she disappeared for a night and returned with bread and bruises. You never asked. You heard things. The laughter of women late at night. The jangle of coins. The occasional slap followed by silence. You learned not to flinch. You learned that the world of women was filled with doors that only opened one way, and some never closed again. Rome itself was a paradox. Grand and decaying. Magnificent and cruel. The city loved its myths. Romulus and Remus suckled by a she-wolf. Jupiter's thunderous rain. The Vestal Virgin's sacred duties. But for girls like you, the stories were different. Less divine. More damp. Your heroes were women who could disappear when danger approached, who knew how to lie without blinking, who could smile with their mouths but not their eyes. By 9, you had your first glimpse of what waited. A neighbor, Lucia, was taken by a man in fine sandals. She returned days later, changed. She wore a necklace now, spoke differently, laughed with more teeth. But her mother wept every time she saw her. Lucia told you stories when no one else would, about men who paid for company and never asked for names, about coins that could buy peace for a night, about rules that didn't apply if you played the game well enough. She said, "Your face will help you. Just don't give it away for free." You were 11 when your mother got sick. The kind of sickness that doesn't kill but takes everything else. Strength, hope, voice. You worked more, ran errands farther, cleaned homes where no one knew your name. You stole once, a small thing, a fig. The guilt didn't last. Hunger spoke louder than morals. And then came the whisper. From a neighbor, from a friend, from a woman who had noticed. She's ready. Those words were not about readiness. They were about value, about economy, about timing. The city didn't wait for you to grow into yourself. It consumed you on schedule. You were 12 when the decision stopped being yours. But let's stay here a little longer. In this moment before the next, before the door closes behind your childhood, listen to the sounds, the drip of water from a roof tile, the distant toll of a bronze bell, the rustle of linen drying in the wind. This is the last evening you will feel untouched by the world. And in this softness, in this fading light, you are still a child, not yet an artifact. Your skin still carries the scent of olive soap. Your hands are still calloused from chores, not caresses. You still sleep curled against your mother's back, dreaming of nothing in particular. But tomorrow will come, and with it, a different kind of silence. The kind that settles into your bones when your body stops being your own. And so, you close your eyes tonight, not knowing that the city is already carving your name into a history it won't bother to remember. You don't remember the exact day your childhood ended. Most don't. It wasn't an event, but a quiet erosion, like chalk dissolving under slow rain. One day you're running barefoot in the dust, chasing a stray chicken. The next, you're walking carefully, eyes low, because men have started to notice you. The street where you lived wasn't marked on most maps. It twisted behind the grain market, branched under an aqueduct, and ended near the public latrines, the kind where senators and slaves shared stone benches, their shadows overlapping like the strata of a city that couldn't decide if it was divine or indecent. By 13, you were no longer sent to the fountain alone. Not because it was unsafe, that had always been true, but because now your mother looked at you with new caution. Her eyes had changed. Not cold, just calculating. She knew the world would not wait for your consent. She had stopped hoping it might. Still, you tried to hold on to something, anything that felt innocent. The way the sun filtered through the linen hung to dry, the smell of warm figs, the sound of sandals slapping uneven stone. These were your anchors in a world already tugging at your edges. And then there were the gods. Rome was full of them, too many to count. Some you saw daily, statues worn smooth by the hands of thousands. Others lived in doorways in offerings of honey and coins. But the ones that mattered to you were not marble. They were small, carved of clay or wood, tucked inside alcoves or beneath mattresses. Your household god was Larry's, or at least that's what your mother said. She whispered to him before leaving the house, offered him crumbs when there was bread to spare. He watches the doorway, she explained. So you don't vanish. You believed her. Not because you thought he was real, but because the idea of someone, anyone, watching over you felt necessary. At the same time, the city whispered a different set of rules. You learned them in glances and gestures, in the way men laughed too loud when you passed, in the way older women narrowed their eyes, silently judging how you walked, how you held your arms, how much you looked like someone they used to be. There was a girl, a few years older, Camilla. She lived across the alley, wore her hair in tight braids, and always had clean nails. She worked in a domus near the river, cleaning for a merchant's wife. She said little, but when she spoke, it was sharp. Don't smile unless you mean it. They'll think it's an invitation. You didn't ask what kind of invitation. Then came the days that blurred. Your mother spoke with a woman you'd never seen before. Well-dressed, perfumed, with fingers heavy with rings. She didn't look at you directly, but her gaze brushed over you like a merchant inspecting cloth. She asked your name, your age. She nodded, left. That night, your mother said nothing. She combed your hair, slower than usual, and tied it with a new piece of thread. Tomorrow, she said, you'll walk with me. And you did. The woman's name was Licinia. She ran a bathhouse, not the kind senators frequented, but one tucked away in the Subura, where the water was warm, but the air stayed heavy with secrets. She told you that you'd help clean, bring towels, maybe learn to pour oil. You're pretty, she said, but that's not enough. You need to know when to talk, when to laugh, when to say no, and how to say yes. You didn't understand it all, but you understood enough. The bathhouse became your new world. You learned fast. How to fold cloth so it didn't unravel. How to warm oil without scorching it. How to hold your expression when men made jokes meant to embarrass you. How to smile without offering anything. Not yet. There were other girls, some your age, some older, all with names that weren't their own. Licinia said names were currency. You don't give away what's yours until someone's paid for it. The days passed in steam and murmur. The bathhouse echoed constantly. Water, footsteps, whispers. You heard stories, secrets, men boasting of conquests. Women warning others of jealous wives. You learned that power didn't always wear armor. Sometimes it came in perfume and suggestion. You watched, listened, waited, and then came the night. It wasn't violent. That would have been easier in a way. It was quiet, calculated. A man who had visited often, who smiled, who offered a silver coin to speak with you in private. Licinia accepted before asking you. Your mother wasn't there. You sat on the edge of a low bench, hands in your lap, heart thudding against your ribs like a trapped bird. The man didn't hurt you, but he didn't ask either. It wasn't about pain. It was about possession. He took what was offered or sold and left a coin on the table. You didn't cry until you got home. Not because you were ashamed, but because you knew nothing had changed, and yet everything had. You were still you, and you were not. That was your true initiation. Not into sex, but into silence, into understanding that your voice had been traded for survival, that your body was now a ledger with entries written by others. Still, life continued. You returned to the bathhouse, walked the same streets, ate the same bread, but now people looked at you differently. Women looked longer, men shorter. You had crossed a threshold, one you couldn't describe, one you couldn't return from. And in this new space, you began to understand the architecture of your world, how Rome itself was a machine of flesh and power, how bodies were used, discarded, remembered only in whispers, how women like you didn't get statues, but sometimes, if lucky, left behind a name carved crudely into brick or painted inside a tavern. You began to collect stories of girls who escaped, rare, like stars on cloudy nights, of women who married clients, fewer still, of those who rose to wealth, ran their own houses, even sponsored temples, and of those who vanished, who were found in ditches or never found at all. You collected these not for hope, but for balance, to remember that your fate wasn't entirely your own, but neither was it written. And amid all this, you found fragments of beauty, a friend who brushed your hair without comment, a woman who slipped you a ribbon just because, a night when you walked home under a sky so clear you forgot for a moment that the city could be cruel. And perhaps that's where your strength began. Not in defiance, but in endurance, in the quiet, repetitive acts of self-preservation, in the knowledge that you were still here, still moving, still breathing under the weight of a city that rarely noticed unless you screamed. And even then, only briefly. You weren't a statue. You weren't a goddess. You weren't even a cautionary tale. You were a girl, becoming a woman inside the living belly of Rome. And Rome, for all its grandeur, was never as alive as in the moments it forgot to be glorious. There is no ceremony when you begin to work, no ribbon tied, no proclamation whispered by the wind. Only a shift so subtle it might have gone unnoticed by the world, but not by your body, or your breath, or your eyes. Now trained to meet a man's glance only when it's useful, and to look away when it's safer. The first real night, not the clumsy encounter, not the warm-up under Licinia's supervision, but the first night you're truly alone with a stranger, it begins with a question. Not from him, from you, not out loud. Will this be the worst? The truth is, it isn't. But it isn't better either. The man is older, rich enough to choose. He doesn't ask your name, and you don't offer it. You've been given a new one anyway. Something soft, floral, forgettable, like jasmine in dust. The room is small, the bed hard. You focus on the lamp flame, the way it flickers as he shifts, the way it paints everything in gold and shadow. You let your mind float, not far, just enough. Enough to forget how his breath smells. Enough to imagine the ceiling belongs to a temple, not a tavern. Enough to make it through. You learn quickly the things that help. The candle's light, a word you repeat in your head, the pattern of your own heartbeat like a rhythm you can still control. You begin to understand the weight of coins, not in value, but in their sound when dropped onto your palm. Some nights, it's one. Some nights, more. You don't count them with hope. You count them like bandages. How many will it take to get through the week? The work is not the hardest part. The hardest part is the pretending. Pretending that the man who calls you Little Rose doesn't remind you of someone who once pushed past you on the street without seeing you. Pretending that when he laughs, you don't flinch because it sounds too much like derision. Pretending that you chose this, you didn't. But now that you're here, you make choices within it. You choose who you speak to, who you trust, who you let braid your hair in the back room, and who you avoid when their eyes linger too long. You build your small world inside the larger machine, a world of habits and instincts, of glances and nods, of silent agreements, like, don't touch unless invited. Don't follow. Don't call me by that name when we're not working. Licinia watches over it all. She's not cruel. She's not kind. She's practical, efficient. She keeps the bathhouse running like a senator keeps a campaign, with favors, threats, and just enough softness to make the girls stay. You realize she once was like you, not because she tells you, but because of the way she touches the door frame when she enters a room, as if checking it's still there, as if memory clings to wood. Some nights, she pulls you aside and says, smile less, makes them want more. Or, never be too available, even to the ones who pay well. It's advice wrapped in survival. And then there's Gaia. Gaia is older, not ancient, but older enough to carry both warning and comfort in her voice. She works from the second floor, has her own lamp, her own basin. Men climb the stairs differently when it's her they visit. Slower, with more intention. She takes you under her wing, but not with affection, with realism. This won't last, she says. Nothing does. So make them remember you, and not just your body. You ask how. She touches her temple. Make them think you see something they don't. But look at them like you're reading a scroll they can't translate. You try it the next time. It works. He stammers. Asks if he said something foolish. You don't reply. He leaves you extra coin. Gaia smirks when you tell her. Good girl, she says. Make them wonder. You build yourself like that, layer by layer, like armor made of silk and dust. Not invincible, but enough to survive. The men are mostly forgettable. Some are loud, some are silent, some cry, and those are the hardest because their sorrow is too familiar. Some fall in love. At least they say they do. You don't believe them, but you let them think you might too. It's safer that way. Love in this business is a script, not a sensation. One brings you figs in a basket. Another writes a poem. One asks if he can save you. You almost laugh, but you don't. Because some girls say yes, and when he doesn't come back, they have nothing left to believe in. So you nod, and you smile, and you stay. Outside, Rome continues. The city does not care what happens inside the bathhouse walls. Senators argue in marble halls. Slaves carry amphorae down cracked steps. Children run after dogs, laughing. The world is large, but your portion of it is small and carved by men's hands. Still, you find places that belong to you. A ledge where the sun hits just right. A vine that blooms purple each spring. A crack in the wall where you hide your favorite coin, the first one that ever felt like yours. Some days you forget to be afraid. Some days you are so tired that even fear cannot find you. And some days something like joy returns. Brief, flickering, like the flame on your first night. You share a joke with another girl. You hear music from the street. You catch your reflection in the water basin and do not flinch. And those moments, they matter. They are what keep you from dissolving completely. You are no longer the girl from the Aventine shadow. You are someone else now. Not a name, not a role, not even a reputation. You are a presence, not noble, not honored, but known. And in Rome, that's something. Because most women, most people, pass through life without ever leaving an echo. You, at least, have begun to carve yours. Not in marble, but in memory. The word they use for you is lupa. At first, you think of the animal, the she-wolf, fierce and wild, nursing the founders of Rome in that ancient myth everyone recites like a lullaby. But that's not what they mean. Not really. In their mouths, lupa is layered. Part insult, part transaction, part legend twisted into something manageable. To them, you are no wolf. Only someone who walks the edge of the city's respectability, devours men in candlelight, and disappears before dawn. But still, there's power in that name. You hold on to it, trace its edges like the rim of a cup. A lupa can survive. A lupa doesn't need a master. A lupa moves through the world with sharp eyes and sharper instinct. If that's what they call you, then so be it. You learn to wear the word like a cloak. They whisper about your kind, some with disdain, merchants clutching their daughters closer when you walk past. Some with amusement, men comparing notes over sour wine. Some with curiosity, like the young scribes who pretend not to look. But none of them know. Not truly. They don't know how carefully you plan your days. The exact time to slip out before the street floods with noise. How to hide a bruise under pigment. How to clean oil from your skin without using too much water. They don't know the rituals. The prayer said not to gods, but to yourself. The checks you do each night. Is the door locked? Is the coin hidden? Is your breath steady? They don't know how much effort it takes to appear effortless. Licinia tells you once, after a long night, they want you to look like you want them, but not too much. Like you're grateful, but not desperate. Like you enjoy it, but never love them. It's a balance. One wrong word and they think you're too cold. One wrong touch and they think they own you. So you walk that narrow path every day. Every night. And the name Lupa follows you like a shadow. But there's more to it, hidden beneath the surface. You begin to hear stories, old ones, older than Rome, of women who danced in moonlight and were called sacred, of temple attendants in lands far away, who offered pleasure not as shame, but as devotion. You ask Gaia one slow evening if she thinks there's truth in that. She shrugs. Maybe. Or maybe men just needed a reason to pay for what they didn't want to admit they needed. You like that answer because it leaves space for mystery. for myth, for imagining that what you do might be more than survival, that it might be a kind of alchemy, the transformation of pain into performance, of loneliness into ritual. And perhaps that's the part they fear most. Not your touch, not your smile, but your ability to see them clearly, to see what they want, and still remain untouched by it afterward. You learn that well. You learn that when they leave, they always look back. Just once, just briefly, as if trying to remember who they were with you and why it mattered. You never look back because you already know who they are. You have to. It's part of the job. You learn the categories. The drunk ones who repeat themselves. The young ones who pretend they're your first. The sad ones who need to be held more than touched. The cruel ones, always watched, always avoided if you can. And the silent ones who leave the coin, say nothing, and vanish like smoke. You also learn the rules beneath the rules. Never drink too much, no matter how sweet the offer. Never undress first. It gives away power. Never speak a real name unless you want to remember who you were, and never fall asleep with them. Sleep is sacred. Sleep is yours. Sometimes girls forget or choose not to follow the rules. You see what happens. Some disappear. Some return broken, softer, quieter. And some just stay longer than they should, hoping something will change. You don't judge them, but you remind yourself you're a lupa, not a pet. There's a difference. The word itself, lupa, echoes in strange places. In graffiti on walls drawn with crude humor. In court records when someone wants to discredit a woman's word. In casual jokes made by men who paid you the night before, but you also hear it whispered with awe sometimes. By girls on the street, eyes wide. By boys who think being with a lupa means they're becoming men. By the desperate who seek comfort, not conquest. And that, perhaps, is your quiet victory. They need you more than you need them. The city doesn't say it out loud, but it knows. The lupi hold its secrets, its sins, its softness. Without you, there would be more violence, more hunger, more silence in the night. You're not part of the glory of Rome. You're not on its coins or scrolls, but you're in its breath, its rhythm, its confession. And in that, there is something sacred, even if they'll never admit it. You walk home under a crescent moon, the cobblestones warm from the day's sun. A cat crosses your path. A man hums drunkenly nearby. Somewhere, a woman laughs, sharp, defiant. You smile to yourself, not because it's funny, but because you're still here, still walking, still you. Lupa, yes, but never lost, never tamed. There's a rhythm to the taverns, a pulse beneath the clatter of mugs and the burble of cheap wine. You learn to hear it, to move with it. It's not like music, it's more like weather, unpredictable but familiar once you've felt its shifts often enough. You become a reader of atmospheres. Tonight, it smells of smoke, olives, and sweat. Someone's roasting onions too close to the hearth. A dog barks once and then settles under a table. Somewhere in the back, dice clatter against wood. A cheer, a curse, and then he walks in. Not the first man, not the last, but one of them. The kind with too many rings and a tunic that's been bleached so often it glows like arrogance. His hair is oiled, curled. His sandals are clean. He doesn't belong here, and that's the point. He sits where he can be seen And not long after, he sees you. You've been leaning in the corner, half shadow, half display. Arms crossed gently, chin tilted, not an invitation, but not a refusal either. You know your angles now, your silences. You don't speak first, he signals. You glide over. That's how it must look to him. In reality, you step carefully to avoid spilled drink and uneven stone. But illusion is part of the service. You lean just close enough that he smells the oil in your hair and not the long day behind you. He starts talking, they always do, about nothing. His farm, his cousin's wedding, a recent trip to Ostia. You nod. You smile with your mouth. Your eyes remain elsewhere, just a little, just enough to make him lean in. The wine arrives. He pours. You sip. It tastes like vinegar with delusions of grandeur. You keep smiling. And then he shifts, just enough to show you the pouch. Coin. The offer isn't verbal. It doesn't have to be. You glance once, then meet his eyes. He's drunk enough to want company, not drunk enough to forget his toga. Perfect. You leave together. The tavern doesn't blink. You take the back streets, safer, quieter. He talks more now, loosening, his breath starting to sour with fermented bravado. He asks your name. You give him one of your many. He laughs, says it sounds exotic. You say nothing. Let him believe it's foreign. Let him think you're a secret. They always want you to be something else, something they can't find in their wives or their mirrors. He tells you he's a merchant or a clerk or a senator's cousin. It doesn't matter. They all smell the same when nervous. You reach the room. He fumbles with his sandals. You help, smoothly, efficiently. It's a dance now. You've done it so often, your fingers move without thought. You untie, you lift, you pour, you soothe. He starts to speak again, something about his wife, or a fight, or his own disappointment. His words are slow, sticky with longing. You listen. That's part of it too. They don't pay just for the body. They pay for forgetting. For a moment where they're not who they are. He asks if you're tired. You smile. He says you have beautiful eyes. You nod. He touches your face like he's the first to ever do it. You let him believe it. And then it begins. The part that no longer feels strange. Not because it isn't, but because you've turned it into routine, into motion, into stillness inside yourself. You breathe through it. Think of warm bread, of sunlight on bricks, of anything but the man. When he's done, he says, "Thank you," like it was a favor. You reply softly, like it didn't cost you anything. He leaves a coin. You don't count it until he's gone. He walks out into the dark. You stay, clean, redress, breathe. Another night, another echo. Back at the tavern, the air has shifted again. A group of soldiers laugh at a joke you missed. A girl you know sings something too loud. A man vomits in the corner. You sit. You wait. You don't belong here either. But that's the point. You're part of the decor and the dream. Familiar and unreachable. Soft enough to hold. Sharp enough to remember. Another man approaches. This one younger, nervous. You sigh inwardly. Not out of dread, out of calculation. This is your work, not your curse, not your shame. Just a system, like any other in Rome, like the law, like the market, like war. You're a merchant of illusion, and business is steady. The Subura doesn't sleep. Not truly. Even at its quietest, there's always a creak, a cough, a sigh between shudders. The lupinaria, the brothels, beat like hidden hearts beneath Rome's skin. Small breathing chambers of desire and resignation, tucked between bakeries, warehouses, and the homes of the almost respectable. Your lupinar is narrow, stone walls thick with years of breath and candle soot. A single hallway leads to 6 rooms, not numbered but known by their smells. Lavender, sweat, mold, wine. Each one holds a story. Each one holds you in pieces, scattered like lost earrings and forgotten sighs. The entrance is quiet by design, discreet. A small arch with fading frescoes of Venus and her doves, barely visible now, worn by rain and judgment. Above the door, a rusted oil lamp sways, more for ceremony than light. You arrive just after sunset, always just after, before the rush, before the air grows thick with expectation. Licinia greets you with a nod. She never says much on these nights, just watches, observes, like a priestess who's seen too many pilgrims to be surprised. The hallway smells of burning oil and damp linen. You pass Gaia's room, her doors half closed, as usual. Inside, you hear murmurs, her voice low, soothing, the way it always is with the men who think they've fallen in love. You wonder, sometimes, if she pities them, or just learned long ago how to make her voice sound like mercy. You reach your own room, third on the left. You light your lamp. It flares, flickers, steadies. The walls are bare, save for one crude painting of a dancing girl. You stare at her sometimes, wondering who painted her, who she was meant to be, if she ever existed at all. There's a small bed, a stool, a basin, a mirror, not glass, but polished bronze, warped and tired. It shows enough. You remove your cloak, check your hair, check your eyes, breathe, and then you wait. They come in waves. The first is a merchant, old, polite, smells of cumin and ink. He asks how your day was. You lie gently. He touches your cheek like a grandfather might. But it's not affection. It's ritual. He wants to believe this is different, that he's different. You let him. The second is a soldier, young, loud. His hands are calloused but uncertain. He kisses your shoulder like he's apologizing. He leaves quickly. Forgetting his belt, you fold it. Set it by the door. He'll return for it. They always do. The third is quiet. Doesn't remove his sandals. Doesn't speak. Leaves double the usual coin. You don't ask why. Between clients, you clean the room with practiced hands. Wipe the bench. Straighten the linens. Breathe through your mouth when necessary. You keep a pouch of crushed mint under the bed. Your own small rebellion against the city's smells. You hear laughter from the hallway. Livia, probably. She laughs too loud, but it keeps the men entertained. You smile, just barely. She'll be hoarse tomorrow. There's a knock. The fourth. He's new. You see it in his posture. He's trying to look relaxed, but his fingers twitch. He offers a coin, drops it, apologizes. You smile, not mockingly, gently, like a teacher. He thanks you after, earnestly. You close the door behind him and sit. Stretch your neck, roll your shoulders, count the coins. Stack them by weight. The hours stretch like wax under heat. You lose track. At some point, Licinia enters. She brings water and bread. You eat slowly. She doesn't speak. You don't need her to. The night continues. More knocks. More men. Some stay too long, some too short. Some don't arrive at all. A quiet gift from fate. You hear Gaia cough, Livia argue. A man stumble down the hallway singing badly. You sit in your room and wait, sometimes with dread, sometimes with relief, but mostly with quiet. And then it's over. The lamp burns low. The hallway empties. You wash your hands, your face. You change into the tunic you sleep in, and softer, cleaner, yours. You lie on the bed, not to rest, but to exhale, to feel the weight of silence press down like a blanket. You close your eyes, and for a moment, just a moment, you pretend this is your room, your home, your life untouched. Outside, Rome stirs. A cart creaks by. A dog barks once, then again. The moon rises slowly, casting silver across the stone. And somewhere, a man you served tonight lies in his own bed, forgetting your name, your voice, your room. But not the feeling. That will linger, like perfume, like ash. And tomorrow, when the door opens again, you'll be there. Lamp lit, hands steady, name forgotten, but never lost. By now, you've learned that your life doesn't belong entirely to you. It never did. It's written in registers, in ledgers, in rules you never voted on, but must obey. Rome doesn't care who you are, only what you are. And for a lupa, everything is regulated. Your body, your movement, your silence. It begins with your name. Not the one your mother whispered into your ear in the quiet hours of infancy. The one that smelled of olive soap and lullabies. That name is gone, at least on paper. In its place is the one listed on your registration tablet, the libellus meretricius. A document that turns your existence into bureaucracy. You are recorded. You are counted. You are legal. You hate that word. Legal. It implies safety, but offers none. It only means that the city knows about you. That the aedles, the magistrates responsible for public morality and order, have your name in their scrolls. They know where you work and often when. You pay your dues. You follow the rules. And in exchange, they leave you alone. Usually. Unless someone complains. Unless a man regrets. Unless a senator needs a scapegoat. Then the legality becomes a net, not a shield. You hear of girls punished for standing in the wrong place, for speaking too loudly, for refusing someone who didn't like being refused. Some were beaten, some were fined, some simply disappeared. The law is clear, but not fair. It says you may not wear the stola, the garment of Roman matrons. That would suggest respectability. You are not allowed to dress like a wife, or walk like one, or speak like one. So you wear tunics cut differently, shorter, looser, designed to be identifiable, to mark you like paint on a wall. Sometimes you imagine yourself from above, just another colored thread in the city's tapestry, stitched tightly but not securely. The rules go further. You must not approach a man in the forum. You must not work near temples. You must not offer services during certain festivals. And if caught breaking these rules, you are brought before a magistrate, asked to explain yourself, but you already know what you'll say. Nothing. Because nothing you say matters when your profession is listed next to your name like a second skin. There are girls who fight, who try to change their station. Some attempt marriage, a tricky game since your libellus brands you even if you leave the trade. Most respectable men won't touch a former meretrix, not unless they're hiding you in the country or in a cellar. You hear of one girl, Flavia, who tried to burn her registration. pretended to be someone else. Worked in a house that didn't ask questions. She was found, dragged to court, branded on her thigh. Not visibly, but symbolically, a mark that says she lied. The punishment isn't for the act. It's for forgetting her place. Still, some succeed. They find men willing to risk it. They marry quietly, move away, start over. But even then, the city remembers. Your past becomes a ghost that sits at the table, sleeps beside your husband, whispers to his friends. Wasn't she? And that's all it takes. Rome doesn't forgive easily, and never forgets. You don't try to escape it. You find another way. You learn to use the law's language against itself. You keep your registration updated, pay your fees, follow the rules outwardly. But behind the door of your lupanar, you are queen. You decide who enters, who stays, who pays. You learn how to speak just enough to make a man feel seen, and just little enough to remain unreadable. You are watched. But you also watch. The guards who linger too long outside the subura. The clerks who sneak in after hours. The magistrate who visits Gaia once a month, his sandals dusty, his breath smelling of figs. They all have power, but they also have shame. And that gives you something. Not protection, but leverage, a kind of invisible armor. You know names, you know patterns, you know who lies with whom and who pays to keep it quiet. Rome runs on secrets, and you are one of its archivists. At night, you lie on your cot, stare at the ceiling, and repeat the names of your clients in your head, not with bitterness, but with precision. You're a woman who lives inside a system built to control you, and yet, you still breathe, you still choose, you still hold something sacred, even if it's just your ability to endure. They wrote you into the laws as a footnote, but you learned to turn that footnote into a story, one told softly behind closed doors, in rooms that smell of oil and longing, a story not carved in stone, but remembered by those who saw you and those who could not forget you. You hear it whispered first in jest, that some women like you serve in temples, that they lie not for coin, but for gods, that somewhere, amid the incense and polished marble, there exists a sacred kind of touch, a kind that cleanses, a kind that isn't shameful. You scoff at first, because how could anything so physical, so used, be holy? But curiosity is a slow-burning flame. And the Subura, for all its noise, is a city of rumors. One evening, you follow a thread. A friend of a friend, Mira, sharp-eyed and always too curious, says she knows a place, not far but hidden, a shrine to Venus Erycina. Not the Venus of poetry and ivory statues. No, this Venus is older, wilder, from the hills of Sicily. They say her priestesses once ruled by desire, by ritual, by knowledge of what men fear most, surrender. You go, not out of faith, but out of fatigue, because there are days when the lupanar feels like a cage, even if you hold the key. The shrine is small, tucked behind a collapsed aqueduct. No signs, no guards, just a worn archway and a bronze plaque, faded by time. Inside, it's quiet. Not silent, Rome never is, but hushed. The kind of hush that feels intentional, like a held breath. There are women, not dressed like priestesses, not robed in gold, just still. Sitting, breathing, waiting. You sit too. No one asks your name. No one offers incense. No one demands coin. For a long time, nothing happens. And then a voice, low, firm, female. Why did you come? You open your mouth, but no words arrive. Not at first. Then, to see if it's true. The woman nods and says, it is. She leads you deeper inside. Not far, just a few steps, into a room lit only by flame and breath. The walls are painted with vines and eyes. The air smells of honey and old smoke. There, she speaks, not in riddles, but plainly. There was a time, she says, when the body of a woman was an offering, when pleasure wasn't bought or stolen, when it was given with purpose to heal, to bind, to open. You listen. You want to believe her. But the memory of last night's client still clings to your skin. She doesn't deny your doubt. She welcomes it. Rome changed it, called it filth, called it crime, because they feared what they couldn't own. They feared softness with power. She tells you about the rites of Venus, about nights when women gathered not to please men, but to remember themselves, to shed the city's dust and re-enter their bodies as temples. You feel something then, not faith, not yet, but a loosening, as if the cords tied around your breath have slackened. She offers no instructions, no conversion, just a place, a possibility. You return to the Lupinar differently that night, not freer, but more aware. You light your lamp slowly. You wash with care. You look at your reflection and, for the first time in days, do not look away. You begin to ask questions, to Gaia, to Mira, to yourself. Had there ever been a time when this work was honored? When a woman's touch was sacred, not secret? You begin to read, slowly, secretly, old scrolls, poems, temple graffiti, pieces of the past, stitched with longing and reverence. You find references to sacerdotes amores, priestesses of love, not in the temples of Jupiter, but in the quiet ones, the hidden ones. You start keeping small tokens, not from clients, but from nights that felt different. A leaf from the shrine, a drop of oil that glowed like morning, a word whispered in a moment of stillness. And you realize you're not a priestess, not in Rome's eyes, but maybe, just maybe, you're something Rome forgot how to name. Not a meretrix, not just a lupa, but a witness to longing, to sorrow, to the strange, flickering thing that passes between two people when masks slip, just for a breath. You learn to breathe into that space, to honor it, not every night. Some nights are just work, but some are something else. You begin to write again, in your mind, then in charcoal, then in scraps of parchment hidden in your stool. Not about love, but about remembering. You write of touch like language, of eyes that speak more than mouths, of the shrine, of the woman's voice, of yourself, not as an object, but as presence, as force. And when clients leave, you no longer feel emptied, just quieter, like a candle after the flame, still warm, still glowing, still here. There are things they don't teach you when you first begin. Not out of cruelty, but because some things can't be taught. They must be whispered or learned through error, or discovered in moments when your pulse quickens and your hands falter. The arts of the night are older than law, older than Rome. They pass through palms and glances from woman to woman, long before scrolls were inked or coins were stamped. You learn the tricks one by one, not from books, from bodies, from observation, from women older than you, whose eyes are tired but sharp, whose voices carry both warning and affection. You learn how to blend myrrh with olive oil to warm the skin, how to dab crushed mint behind your ears to stay alert, how to use ash to hide fatigue under your eyes. You learn that a single drop of rose water on your wrist can silence suspicion, and that silence itself is often the most powerful tool. There's a market for these secrets, and not just among clients. Among lupi, knowledge is currency. You trade it like favors, a new recipe for softening hands in winter. A charm whispered in Greek to prevent a man from speaking your name too loudly in his dreams. A fold of cloth that lifts the chest without binding it. And, perhaps most sacred of all, the placement of a hidden knife, just in case. You're not superstitious, but you're not foolish either. You'll learn to walk with rosemary tucked in your sash just to keep the bad air away. You sleep with your feet facing the door so no spirit enters through your dreams. You drink fennel tea before bed to keep your stomach calm after difficult nights. Sometimes clients ask what perfume you wear. You smile, say jasmine, let them imagine a garden, but the truth is more complex. You wear a blend passed down by a woman named Albinia, who once worked near the Circus Maximus. She gave it to you after you helped her clean up when a soldier vomited in her basin. You were kind, she said. Kindness should smell like something. So it does. Warm, spiced, lingering. Not like flowers, like memory. You learn the science of touch, too. How to press a man's palm just so to calm his nerves. How to breathe slower than him so he follows your rhythm without knowing. How to watch his throat when he swallows. It tells you more than his words. The body is a language, and you, over time, become fluent. Not for seduction, for survival. Because in your world, knowing means safety. The ones who don't learn, they fade quickly. You've seen it. Girls who trust too easily, who drink what's offered, who fall asleep when they shouldn't. They vanish. Their names whispered once, then never again. So you study, the way others study law or scripture. You study breath, movement, pause. You know how long it takes for wine to reach the bloodstream, how to spot a bruise before it blooms, how to predict a mood from a step in the hallway. There's poetry in this, if you look closely. Not the kind sung in forums or carved into marble. A quieter kind. You find it in the way you wrap your sash, in the order you prepare your room, in the click of the oil lamp when you light it every evening, with the same prayer under your breath. Let the night pass softly. And sometimes it does. You have regulars now, men who know your rules, who speak gently, who tip well. You still don't trust them, but you know their patterns, and that too is power. Then there are the rituals you keep for yourself, small, hidden, holy. You clean your feet with rosemary water every evening as if to erase the steps you took that day. You burn lavender when the house is empty just to remember what quiet smells like. You write lines in charcoal on the wall beneath your bed. Not poetry, just words, fragments, pieces of yourself. Some nights you sit by the window and watch the moon rise over the rooftops. And in that light, you're not a lupa, not a number on a list, not a possession or a performance. You're just a woman, alive, still here, still whole. And perhaps that's the oldest magic of all. Some say your kind cannot love, that affection, when sold, becomes counterfeit. That repetition numbs the heart, smooths its edges, hollows it out. That your smiles, traded for coin, leave no room for anything real. But they are wrong. Not entirely, but enough. You've known love, not the epic kind sung by poets, not the dangerous fire-lit kind that ruins women in tragedy scrolls. Yours is quieter, softer, tucked into corners, exchanged in glances, built for moments most wouldn't notice. It began with a look. He wasn't beautiful. He wasn't even particularly kind, not at first. But he returned, not just for the body, but for the silence between words, for the way you folded the linens, for the way you laughed, once, by accident, and didn't take it back. He didn't ask your name, not the working one, not the hidden one. He only asked, "Are you tired?" And when you said yes, he said nothing else. He just sat, didn't touch, didn't demand. That silence became a tether. He came back, brought bread, still warm from a bakery you used to visit as a child. He offered it without ceremony, without presumption. You broke it in half and gave him the larger piece. It meant nothing. It meant everything. He spoke of small things, not his life. He never mentioned a wife or a job or even a home. Just thoughts, observations. He told you once that the stars looked closer in the Subura, as if they were falling into the cracks of the city. You told him they probably were. One night, he kissed your hand, not the fingers, the back, softly, and left. You didn't see him for a month. You told no one, kept the memory like a warm stone in your pocket. Then he returned, looking thinner, tired. He said, "I'm not here for that. I needed a place to be." You let him sit. You let him sleep beside you. Nothing more. The next morning, he left a coin anyway. You didn't take it. He didn't try again. After that, he came irregularly. Always with something, fruit, a flower, once a broken comb he thought you could fix. You kept them all, hid them in a pouch under your mattress. You didn't call it love, not out loud, but it changed things. It made you softer, even when you didn't want to be. It made other men harder to tolerate. It made your silences deeper. You knew it couldn't last. Nothing does. And when the disappearance came, sudden as all endings are, you didn't cry. You lit a candle instead, left it by the window, watched it burn down. That was your morning. Years pass. You think of him less, but not never. Sometimes when a man brushes your hand a certain way, you flinch, not from pain, but from memory. Not all love hurts, but all love leaves a mark. You've seen it in others too? Girls who fall for clients who beg girls to run away with them. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they return. Wiser, harder. You don't judge. Love in your world is a flower that grows in cracks. Unlikely, delicate, miraculous, but not impossible. You learn to treasure its presence even when fleeting. You stop waiting for it, but you never close the door completely. You keep a petal from a rose he once brought you, dried, crumbling, still red. You press it between parchment. Not to remember him, but to remember that once, in the middle of the noise and the fire and the endless hunger of the city, someone touched your hand like it meant something. And you let them. And it did. And even if it never happens again, once is enough. They see you. Oh, they see you. And yet, they do not. They pass you on the street, with eyes sharp and mouths curled in disapproval, as if they had not knocked on your door just nights before, as if your skin were shameful only in daylight, as if your profession stained their world instead of serving it silently. You walk with your head held neither high nor low, but balanced, practiced, like the water jugs the matrons carry, only heavier in a way no one measures. You feel their eyes, the women who hiss your name behind closed shutters, the men who pretend they don't recognize you outside the lupanar, though your touch still lingers on their bodies. This is the tension you live inside, visible and invisible, desired and despised, the city's secret and its open joke. They laugh, not with you, at you, but not always to your face. That would require courage and shame. Neither is common in Rome. You begin to notice the subtle variations. There's the ridicule of the young, bold, thoughtless, unshaped by pain. They throw words like stones, imagining themselves clever. You ignore them, or smile, or ask a question that cuts more than any insult could. Something simple, like, who taught you to fear what you want? They never have an answer. Then there's the envy. That one's harder to name. It comes from women who see in you a freedom they weren't allowed to want, who were married at 12, pregnant at 14, and hollowed out by 30. They see you childless, unmarried, moving through the night as if it were your own. They think you're lucky. They don't know the cost, but still, they resent. And finally, there's the scorn of the righteous. Men in fine robes who write laws during the day and break them by torchlight, who lecture their sons on virtue, then slip into your room before moonrise. They pretend their coin cleanses the act. That payment makes it business, not betrayal. You are not bitter, not always, just observant. You start to keep a mental ledger, not of debt, but of hypocrisy. The baker who refuses you service unless you're with a man. The priest who sprinkles holy water on his robe after brushing past you. The senator's wife who spits near your feet but sends her maid to ask about your perfume. You hold their contradictions like charms, not for revenge, for clarity. In a world where truth is bartered more than flesh, knowing is power. Still, it wears you down. Not the work, the pretending. The way you must nod and smile and laugh, knowing full well that the same man will brag to his friends about how little he paid or how easily you moaned, as if your pleasure were part of the performance, not a learned response, not a practiced art. You begin to speak less, not out of silence, out of selection. Would you choose your words like weapons now? Small, precise, silent until they land. And land they do. Once, a man called you filthy. You replied, yet cleaner than your conscience. He left without finishing. Didn't come back. Good. Another time, a woman in the market muttered whore under her breath as you passed. You turned gently and said, at least I know the price of my company. She blinked and said nothing. Because the truth is this. The shame isn't yours. Never was. You do not steal. You do not lie. You sell what is yours to sell. And even that, only on your terms. They mock you because you make them question what they've been told. That a woman's body belongs to someone else. A father, a husband, a god. You refuse that ownership. And for that, they call you names. Let them. Words are wind. And you've weathered worse. Still, some days it aches. Especially when it's quiet. When the street is empty. When you pass a doorway where someone once stood and smiled at you without judgment. When a child points and asks too loudly, "Mama, what is she?" And the mother replies with a tug, a hush, a sidelong glance. You want to shout, I am the one who keeps your husband sane. I am the one who hears their fears, their secrets, their failures. I am the one who reminds them they are mortal and forgives them anyway. But you don't. You keep walking because the street is not your stage, because your story doesn't need an audience to be true, because you've learned something powerful, something unteachable. You do not need to be respected to be whole. You do not need to be loved to love yourself. You do not need their approval to sleep at night. You need only your breath, your name, the real one, the buried one, and the knowledge that you survived a world that tried to erase you with laughter and failed. You reach your room. You remove your sandals. You wash your hands. The water is cold, but your heart is not. You light your lamp, sit. Write a word on the wall, just one. Not your name, not theirs. Something older, softer, like dignitas or fides. Something they forgot belonged to you, too. You watch the flame flicker. Outside, someone laughs. Not at you, not tonight. You smile and exhale, because you are still here. Still more than they see. Still more than they can say. And that is enough. It's a quiet truth among the women of the Lupanar, something not often spoken but never forgotten. The body remembers. It remembers the days of hunger and the nights of performance. It remembers who touched you gently and who didn't. It remembers the pace, the breath, the repetition. But above all, it remembers the risk. There is no protection for you, not truly. The oils and herbs help, yes, but not always, and never completely. And so, eventually, inevitably, it happens. You wake up one morning with a heaviness inside you that isn't sleep or sorrow or the ache of too many bodies. It's something else, something older, something silent. You count the days. Twice, 3 times, you tell no one. At first, you wait, hoping that perhaps your body is mistaken, that it's just exhaustion, a skipped cycle, a misfire. Rome is full of smoke and poison and stress. It can interrupt anything. You tell yourself this. You pray, if that's what it can be called, not to a god, but to chance. But the days stretch, and your stomach shifts, and your breath shortens, and you know. You don't cry. You sit on your stool, brush your hair slowly and stare into the bronze mirror, watching your eyes for signs of panic. There are none. Just fatigue. Just questions. You tell Gaia, because if anyone will understand, it's her. She says nothing at first, just places a hand on your shoulder and squeezes once, gently. Then she tells you what to expect, not just in your body, in your mind. The fear, the judgment, the shift in how the other girls look at you. Some will avoid you, others will pity you. A few may offer help, a midwife, a tea, a story of someone who once carried and survived. You thank her. That night, you keep working. Not because you want to, because you must. The coins won't wait. The landlord won't forgive. The city won't pause. So you go through the motions. You choose your clients more carefully now. Avoid the rough ones. Stay away from drunks. You lie a little more. Smile a little less. You begin to walk with your hand over your stomach without noticing, as if already guarding something. Weeks pass. Your tunic tightens. The world does not. Licinia notices, of course. She pulls you aside. Her face is unreadable. She says, you have 2 months, maybe 3. Then you're off the list. You nod. You knew this. She doesn't offer comfort. Only instructions. Find someone to take your place. Find somewhere to stay. Find a way to live that doesn't require performance. You think about leaving. But where would you go? The city isn't kind to women alone, and even less to those carrying visible proof of decisions they didn't get to make. You stop working by the 7th month. Your back aches. Your feet swell. You sleep in a borrowed room above a tavern, owned by a widow who once worked beside you and managed to buy her way out. She lets you stay for now, says nothing. Sometimes brings warm soup. You're grateful. Gratitude, you've learned, is quieter than love, but stronger. Then the day comes. Labor. It's long, hard, the kind that rips and burns and leaves you somewhere between this world and the next. But you survive. So does the baby. It's a girl, of course it is. You name her something you never used for yourself. Soft, strong, untouched by commerce. You don't tell anyone who she is. Not because you don't know. Because it doesn't matter. You hold her. You breathe her in. She smells like milk and something clean. Something new. Something not yet worn down by the city's weight. You want to keep her. Of course you do. But wanting is a luxury. So you weigh everything. The food, the coins, the time, the risk. You hold her at night. And you think of all the names she could be called. All the paths she might walk. All the doors that might not open. And then you choose. You give her to a woman in Trastevere, a baker's wife who cannot have children, who once helped you when you twisted your ankle running from a guard. You leave the baby wrapped in your cleanest tunic. You do not look back. But later that night, you burn the rest of your clothes. All but one. The one you wore when she was born. You keep that. Not as a reminder of loss, as proof that once your body did more than endure. It created. It carried. It survived. You return to the Lupanar 2 weeks later. No fanfare, no judgment, just a nod from Licinia. A small lamp in your room. A fresh basin of water. You are different now. Softer, perhaps, but not weaker. You work again. Slower. Wiser. You find yourself humming lullabies under your breath without realizing. Some clients ask about the scar across your belly. You say nothing. Just smile. Let them imagine it came from anything but love. At night, you lie on your bed and close your eyes and wonder if she'll ever know you. If she'll pass you in the street one day and feel something stir. If she'll grow into a woman who walks freely, who isn't judged by her clothes or her choices or her past. And if she does, if she becomes that woman, then maybe, just maybe, all of this will mean something more than survival. It will mean legacy. It will mean change. It will mean that you, once called Lupa, once forgotten by scrolls and names, once erased by law and laughter, gave Rome not just your body, but your future. Time does something strange to you in the Lupanar. It doesn't pass the way it does for others. It doesn't tick like a senator's sundial or move with the rhythm of market bells. Time here is softer, circular. It loops through candlelight and footsteps and the sound of coins dropped into cloth. Every evening folds into the next like a page, turned slowly, deliberately, but never read twice. You have grown into the work now, not in the way a girl grows into a dress, but in the way a tree bends toward the wind. Your roots are deeper. Your trunk is stronger, but you still sway. And now, something has changed again. You're no longer the youngest. A new girl arrived last week. 17, maybe. Thin, silent, eyes too large for her face and too guarded for her age. She doesn't speak unless spoken to, doesn't smile unless forced. She watches everything. You recognize her instantly, not because you know her, but because you remember being her. She moves the way you did when you first arrived. Careful, hesitant, always expecting something to fall or break or grab. Licinia assigns her a room across from yours. You hear her crying the first 2 nights. She tries to be quiet. You say nothing, but you leave a cloth soaked in lavender by her door. The next night, the crying stops. A week later, she knocks. She doesn't say thank you. She doesn't need to. You let her in. She sits, legs tucked beneath her, eyes darting like a deer in a city square. You offer her water. She takes it. After a long silence, she asks, "Does it ever get easier?" You want to say yes. You want to lie. But instead, you answer the way Gaia once answered you. It gets quieter. She nods, as if that's something she can live with. You begin to teach her, not formally, not with rules or structure, but with presence, with glances, with the raising of an eyebrow before she enters a room, with a hand gently pulling her back when a client looks too eager, too loud, too clean. You tell her the things that matter. Never drink if you didn't see it poured. Always leave something unsaid. Smell his breath before you smell his coin. She listens, watches, learns. It's slow. But one evening, you see her smile. Not the smile of the job, a real one. Small, uncertain, but there, and you feel something shift inside you. Not pride, something gentler, something like continuation. You start to share other things, too. The places in the city where it's safe to walk at night, which baker will give you a stale loaf for a wink and a joke. Where to find rosemary that hasn't been picked over. You tell her about the shrine to Venus Erycina, and one day, you take her there. She doesn't speak during the visit, but her hand lingers on the wall as you leave. Later she asks you, "Do you think Venus hears us?" You shrug. She doesn't need to. We hear each other. You think about that for a long time after. You begin to notice how the others treat her. Some with caution. The young ones always draw attention. Some with kindness. Livia gives her a comb she no longer uses. Gaia watches her with the soft warning of a woman who's buried too many memories. You become her guide, unofficially, her protector, her mirror, and through her, you begin to remember pieces of yourself that you thought lost. Not the innocence, but the hunger, the desire to still be more than the work, more than the name, more than the silhouette behind a curtain. You teach her not just how to endure, but how to choose, which men to entertain, which to avoid, which to let believe they're in control, and which to never speak to again. She listens to everything, and slowly she becomes something else. Still herself, but stronger, sharper, softer in the right places, harder where it counts. She still cries sometimes, but not alone, not anymore. You hold her hand when needed. You offer silence when words won't help. One night, after a particularly hard client, she stumbles into your room and sits beside you. "I hated that," she says. You nod. "I know. And that's enough. You don't try to fix it. Just witness it. You realize that in this work, no one teaches you how to care for others. You're taught how to entertain, how to survive, but not how to pass on the knowledge gently. You do it anyway, because someone once did it for you, because memory demands continuity, because if this work is a river, then you are the stones that help another cross. You think about the future sometimes, not yours, hers. You wonder if she'll leave. Find a patron, a husband, a quieter city. You hope she does, but you don't say it. You don't want to make it a goal. This life isn't something to escape. It's something to navigate. And some nights, that navigation requires maps written in glances and gestures and late-night conversations over cold soup. So you stay and guide and protect. And in doing so, you find a kind of healing that no client ever gave you. You find yourself becoming a woman other women can turn to. Not just a lupa, but something older, wiser. Like the roots of a tree, hidden, but holding everything together. One night, she braids your hair. It's uneven, tangled. She laughs. You let her, because this too is part of the work, the real work, the unseen labor of holding each other up when the world would rather you fall. And that night, as you blow out the lamp and lie down, you feel lighter. Not because the world has changed, but because within it, you have made space for someone else to rise. And in that rising, you are lifted too. The city never sees you, but you see everything. That's one of the quiet truths of your life, a kind of strange, sacred compensation. You exist in the edges, the alleys, the corners of Rome's vast body, but from there, you see it more clearly than most ever will. While senators argue in the forum, you watch how their hands tremble after a long night. While matrons walk past with noses high, you see the bruises beneath their sleeves. You see Rome not in its monuments, but in its murmurs. Not in the marble, but in the mud. You learn to observe like a shadow, soft, unnoticed, everywhere. From your window, you watch the street unfold each morning. The baker's boy slipping fresh bread into a widow's hands without charge. The tailor's apprentice who lingers a little too long at the butcher's cart, eyes locked on someone he shouldn't desire. The priest who blesses the market and then slips behind a curtain where his hand no longer moves with reverence. You remember their names, not to use against them, just to understand them. To remember that behind every proclamation of virtue is often a trembling need. And you begin to see the patterns. Who visits whom? Who leaves flowers in secret? Who changes tunics when no one is watching? There's a language to the city, not Latin, but movement. The way someone walks, the angle of a head, the twitch of a hand when a name is spoken. You become fluent. It's not a power anyone asks for, but it keeps you safe. More than once, your knowledge warns you before danger arrives. A man's voice too steady, a coin passed with fingers that shake, a girl missing at the end of the night. You piece things together before anyone else even notices something's wrong. Sometimes you act, subtly, a warning glance, a lie told in the right ear. A client turned away with a phrase that sounds like apology but means escape. The other women begin to notice. They come to you now, not just for advice, but for interpretation. What does it mean when he... Do you think she... Have you heard anything about... You answer carefully. truths when possible, silence when necessary. You're not a gossip, you're a keeper, and knowledge in your world is not something to flaunt, it is something to guard. Still, there are nights when it becomes too much, when your mind buzzes with details you wish you didn't know. Who cheats, who lies, who hurts and hides and never answers for it. You go to the shrine again, those nights, the one for Venus Erycina. You sit on the stone steps, hands wrapped around your knees, and let your breath settle. You whisper names, not to curse them, to release them, because your heart cannot hold every secret forever. And when you rise, lighter, you return to the city with eyes still sharp, but soul less burdened. You realize something after a while. The city does not see you because it cannot afford to. To see you would be to confront itself, the hunger, the loneliness, the contradiction. To acknowledge your presence would be to admit that Rome is not only built on marble and war, but also on the backs of women who hold its nights together. So you remain unseen, but you never become blind. You watch, and you remember. The man who cries after every visit. The girl who keeps a dagger in her sandal and never sleeps without it. The thief who once gave you his coat on a rainy evening and asked for nothing in return. You hold these memories the way others hold prayers. Not to worship, to endure. And sometimes, rarely, you're rewarded for this witnessing. A child smiles at you with no malice in their eyes. A stranger nods, not in lust, but in recognition. The client returns and says, I don't need the night, just the conversation. And you give it. Not always, but when it feels right. Because you understand now. Your presence is not a curse, it is a record, a ledger of Rome's true self. Written not in ink, but in glance and gesture and breath. You are the city's hidden conscience, and it doesn't even know. But one day, perhaps, when the walls fall, when the marble cracks, when the statues lie buried and the scrolls turn to dust, someone will dig through the stone and find the layers beneath. And maybe, just maybe, they will see your footprints in the alley. In the stories, in the eyes of those who survived because you watched when others looked away. And they will know. You were here, you saw, you remembered. And because of that, the city was never truly blind. There is a certain intimacy in hardship, a closeness forged not by affection, but by shared weight. You begin to notice it more as the years settle in. Like dust between the cobblestones. The women around you, once just names behind doors, flickers in hallways, voices rising and falling with the rhythm of men's breath, become something else. Family? No, but something kin to it. Not bound by blood, but by repetition, by routine, by the endless circling of nights that demand everything and leave behind little. You know their habits better than their histories. Livia hums before she sleeps, as if calming herself like a child. Gaia drinks a small cup of wine with salt in it before every client, says it sharpens the senses. Mira counts her steps down the corridor. Exactly 12. Always 12. You know the sound of their laughter. Not the laughter for clients, light and practiced, but the deeper kind. The laughter that only slips out when they're alone with you, shoulders dropped, sandals off, something soft in their hands like bread or wine or warmth. In those moments, you feel the weight of the facade fall. You see the girls they were and the women they've become, not because they wanted to, but because they had to. Friendship here is fragile. It has to be. Too much closeness invites pain, jealousy, fear, memory. And so, you form bonds carefully, like weaving a net you hope won't tear when the tide comes in. Still, some nights, you sit together on the roof after the clients leave. The city hums below, a muted echo of laughter, music, footsteps. You pass a jug between you, watered wine, sweet and sour. No one talks much. You just sit, breathe, rest. Those nights are holy. Not because of the silence, but because no one expects anything from you, not even each other. But not all moments are soft. There are tensions. There always are. A client who favors one girl too often. A stolen necklace. A whisper that someone plans to leave, to escape, to marry, to vanish. The closeness fractures, but never breaks entirely. You argue, you shout, you retreat, but you always return. Because who else will understand? Who else will know what it means to sleep through a scream because you've heard too many? Who else will help you bind your chest when your milk doesn't stop after loss? Who else will sit with you in the bath, both of you silent, watching the oil on the surface swirl like thoughts too heavy to voice? They become your mirrors, not of vanity, but of survival. Through them, you see yourself as you are, not as men see you. You see the line of strength in your jaw, the curve of patience in your back, the quiet fury in your hands when someone wrongs a girl too young to defend herself. There's a girl named Servilia, new, barely 16. She bruises easily, doesn't speak unless prompted. Her first client was rough. Licinia said nothing. Business is business. You and Gaia tended to her afterward, not with words, with water, with balm, with silence. That night, the others left offerings outside her door. Not gifts, but symbols, a folded cloth, a carved charm, a bit of bread. She never acknowledged them, but none went missing. You learn that sisterhood here is not loud. It's not celebrated. It doesn't wear garlands or sing songs. It passes hands beneath tables. It hides in shared looks across the hall. It waits in the pause before a door closes. Sometimes you dream of them, not in the past, in the future. You see Livia with silver in her hair, laughing in a house by the sea. You see Mira walking freely through a market, child on hip, no eyes judging her. You see Gaia resting, truly resting, without checking the door. You don't see yourself, not always, but you hope. Hope that wherever they end up, they carry a piece of you with them, not as debt, as warmth. Because if there is anything worth keeping from this life, it's this. The knowledge that in the darkest corridors of Rome, in rooms that smelled of wax and skin and longing, there were women who held each other together, who wiped tears without asking, who offered the last bit of soup without needing thanks, who defended each other not with swords, but with silence and presence. That is your history, not the names of emperors or the dates of battles, but the quiet, ferocious tenderness of survival shared. So tonight, when you return to your room, you leave the door open just a little longer. Let the lamp burn a little lower. Let the sound of another's footsteps comfort you. You are not alone. Not tonight. Not ever again. Time carves the body in ways the city never sees. You used to think aging would arrive all at once, a sudden collapse of youth, a visible marker of years past and choices made. But that's not how it comes. Not in this life. It seeps in slowly like wine through linen. A softness in the knees, a longer sigh at the end of the night, a stiffness in your hands when you rise too quickly. The work teaches you to notice, not just others, but yourself. And so, you begin to trace the changes. The lines around your eyes deepen. Not from weeping, you stopped that years ago, but from squinting at clients, at candles, at the impossible expectations men place on women who age without their permission. Your hips ache more often now. Your back, once proud and silent, hums with complaint after long evenings. Your feet are less forgiving. Sandals that once danced now blister. You notice the way the younger ones look at you. Not with pity. Not yet. But with a careful curiosity of those who know they might one day become you. You don't mind. You've learned that age here is both curse and crown. The newer girls still draw the clients who want softness, newness, pliability. But you carry something else. Control, confidence, command. You've become the woman they request when they're too drunk to lie, too ashamed to ask gently. When they want someone who won't fall in love with them or pretend to. You know how to touch without yielding, how to lead without speaking, how to end a session before it begins, sometimes with a look, sometimes with a hand placed softly on a wrist, reminding them, you will behave. And they do. Because you've survived longer than they expected. Because your presence is no longer novelty. It is reputation. But even so, the wear shows. You begin to sleep more during the day. You start turning away clients whose names you don't recognize. You keep a small jar of honey by your bed. Not for pleasure, but for the throat, which now cracks too easily when you speak in the mornings. You're still beautiful, but not in the way they demand. You are beautiful like the Tiber, slow, wide, dangerous when provoked. You are beautiful like the ruins, weathered, storied, irreplaceable. Still, you feel the loss, not of youth, of momentum. There were days, years ago, when you could carry 3 clients in a night and still have energy to walk to the shrine before dawn. Now, 1 is enough. Sometimes, too much. You begin to count your years not by birthdays, those were never yours, but by seasons of exhaustion. There was the year of the fever, when 3 girls died in a week, and you nursed 2 others back to strength with garlic tea and prayer. The year of the fire, when the house next door burned, and you pulled Livia from her bed with minutes to spare. The year of silence after your closest friend vanished without a word, and you stopped speaking for nearly a month. These are your markers, not celebrations, survivals. And yet, amid the fatigue, there is clarity. You no longer apologize for your limits. You no longer pretend to enjoy every hand. You charge more, you answer less. You take time. In the mornings when the house is still, you sit by the window and soak your feet in rosemary water. You close your eyes and breathe. You think of nothing, or everything, whichever comes first. Some nights, you don't work. Not because you can't, because you choose not to. That, too, is a victory. You spend more time with the younger girls, teaching gently, warning without fear, passing on techniques, rituals, rules they didn't think to ask about. You watch them make mistakes and learn. You begin to be called mother, not by everyone, and not with affection always, but with a kind of reverence. You laugh at it, but inside, it settles like warmth, because you know what it means to have someone who lasts. And you have lasted longer than the ones who left, longer than some clients who thought themselves immortal, longer than the walls of your first lupanar, now rubble, replaced by a market stall selling pickled olives and cheap jewelry. You sometimes pass by that spot. You stand across the street and look. No one remembers what used to be there, but you do, and that's enough. You carry the memory. You carry it in your joints, in your breath, in the rhythm of your hands as you light your lamp each night. You're not tired because you're weak. You are tired because you have been strong for too long without rest. And now, you begin to make space for that rest. Small, slow moments. A nap without guilt. A bath drawn hotter than usual. A walk that leads nowhere. You start dreaming again. Not of escape, but of peace. Of a room where no one knocks. Of a meal shared without urgency. Of a night that ends not with coin, but with a song you hum for yourself. And maybe, just maybe, when the day comes when you can no longer work, you will find that peace waiting. Not as a gift, as a reward. For every lamp you lit. For every woman you held. For every day you chose to rise when the world would have preferred you fall. That is your legacy. Not written in stone, but etched in the bones of those who remember, and those who will come after. They say there are places beyond Rome where the air is gentler, where the shadows don't cling to your skin, and the streets don't know your name. Places where no man knocks on a door unless invited, and the night isn't something to fear. You didn't used to believe in them. Stories passed between girls in low whispers, like prayers to gods no longer listening. But now, as the ache in your knees deepens, and your breath shortens after just a flight of steps, you begin to wonder. What if there is a place where your name means nothing? What if forgetting yourself is how you finally remember who you were supposed to be? It starts quietly. Not as a decision, but a feeling, a stillness in your chest one morning. You wake before the sun, before the house stirs. The lamp beside your bed flickers weakly, its oil nearly gone. You don't rush to refill it. You sit, you listen. There is only your breath. For the first time in what feels like years, you don't dread the sound. You rise slowly. Wash your face. Your reflection in the basin is softer than you remembered. Not youthful, not anymore, but steady. You make your rounds that morning like always. Check the cloths. Sweep your space. Offer a word or two to the girls who pass you with tired eyes. But something has shifted. Gaia notices first. She doesn't say it outright. Just watches. Like she's seen the edge of this path before. One afternoon, she brings you a small bundle, wrapped in plain linen. Inside, a folded piece of parchment with a name, an address, and a location just outside the city walls, near the river, south of the orchards. I stayed there, she says, years ago, after my fever. The woman who owns it is kind, doesn't ask, doesn't answer. You hold the parchment. Your hand trembles, not with fear, with the possibility that the story might be real. That freedom is not only for the young, the lucky, the noble. That you might still arrive somewhere soft. You don't leave that day. There is still time to prepare. There is always time until there isn't. So, you begin the work of unraveling your life. Quietly, you reduce your hours. Choose your clients. Refuse the ones who smell of cruelty or desperation. You gather your coin, not all at once. You've been saving for years, small amounts, hidden beneath a loose stone in your room. Each piece tucked in cloth, oiled to prevent tarnish. You don't count them. You don't need to. You know when it will be enough. You begin to let go of things, not in grief, in gratitude. The perfume you never liked but wore for a merchant's sake, you give it to Livia. The red comb from your 3rd year, passed to Servilia, who still braids her hair too tight. The scarf from your daughter's swaddling cloth, folded carefully, left with Gaia. You pack only what matters. A change of tunic. A small vial of lavender oil. The carved wooden charm you took from the shrine to Venus Erycina on your last visit. And the lamp. Not because you need it, because it's the only thing that ever stayed. You leave a note carved in the soft wood of your doorframe. It says, "I was here, I watched, I remembered." Then, before dawn, you walk. You choose the alleyways you know best, the ones that echo with your footsteps like an old friend. The city is asleep, mostly. A cart creaks in the distance. A dog sniffs your trail and moves on. You pass the bakery, the temple steps, the fountain where a senator once pressed a coin into your palm and whispered his son's name like a confession. You pass them all. Not as a farewell, as release. The road out is long, but not unfamiliar. You walked it once as a girl, not this exact path, but one like it. Away from home, towards something unknown. Back then, it was survival. Now, it's something else. It's choice. By mid-morning, the city is behind you. The building's thin. The noise softens. The sky opens. You breathe differently out here. Like your lungs have space for the first time in decades. The house appears around midday. Small. Stone. Quiet. Exactly as promised. A woman greets you at the door. She's older than you. Her hair gray, her arms strong. She looks at you, not with recognition, but with welcome. "Hungry?" she asks. You nod. She leads you inside. There is bread, olives, a stew you cannot name but eat slowly, savoring every bite. You sleep that night on a cot by the window. It smells of thyme and sun. No one knocks, no one enters. You are alone, and not lonely. Days pass, then weeks. You begin to rise with the sun. Walk barefoot in the garden. Wash your hair in the rain. There is no schedule, no expectation. You mend what breaks. You cook what's gathered. Sometimes the woman, her name is Marcia, tells you stories. Not of Rome, of birds, weather, herbs. It's enough. One morning, you sit by the river, the one from your dream. It is real, cool, wide, endless. You place your feet in the water and close your eyes. You do not think of the lupanar. You do not think of clients, of men, of laughter that came too close to weeping. You think only of this, that your body is quiet, that your breath is your own, that no one knows your name, and yet you are known. One evening, Marcia sits beside you. She doesn't speak, just hands you a piece of parchment. It's blank. You look at her. She nods. "It's time you wrote your own ending," she says. You take the parchment. You don't write immediately. You wait until the night is deep and still. Then, slowly, you begin. "I lived. I endured. I witnessed. And I found peace." You smile. Fold the parchment. Tuck it beneath your pillow. You may never return to the city. Or maybe one day, you will walk its streets again, a stranger to all who pass. But that no longer matters, because now you know. You are more than what they named you, more than what they touched, more than what you gave. You are a woman who lived, and now you rest, fully, freely, finally. They do not remember you. Not truly. The city has moved on. The rooms where your voice once rose in laughter or softened into breath now echo with others. New footsteps, new names, new women learning how to endure. The men, they forget the faces, only remember the feeling, the slight thrill of being chosen, the comfort of being touched without judgment, the silence afterward that didn't ask questions. You were never meant to be remembered, and yet you are everywhere. In the cracks of the walls in the Subura, where names were once scratched in charcoal, quickly, urgently, before a guard passed by. In the smoothed edges of the stone benches outside the bathhouse, where your body once rested, tired but not broken. In the rhythm of footsteps on the Via Nova, late at night, when someone walks faster, heart pounding, not out of guilt, but fear of being seen by someone who remembers. You live in the graffiti on tavern walls, the crude drawings of women with exaggerated hips and knowing eyes, the phrases left behind by drunk soldiers. Felicia has softer hands than war. Or, the goddess of wine lives in room 3. They weren't talking about gods. They were talking about you and your sisters and those who came before. You live in the linen, the oil-stained fabric that's been washed too many times, carrying the scent of rosemary and skin and longing. You live in the muscle memory of the city, the quiet understanding that desire is a language, and you were fluent. You live in the stories whispered between boys just before their first visit, passed from older brothers, older cousins, with reverence and thrill. She laughed. She knew my name before I said it. She made me feel like I mattered. You didn't. Not to them. Not in the way that lasts. But in those moments, small, flickering, and fragile, you held their shame, their need, their aching, aging hope, and made it feel human. You live in the spaces they don't write about. The back rooms, the kitchens, the alleys behind temples where priests touched and repented in the same breath. You live in the silence of history. But that silence isn't empty. It hums with breath, with presence, with the weight of everything Rome took, used, and forgot. You walk through the city now, years later, unseen. Not because you're invisible, because you've learned to be silence. You pass men who once knew you in candlelight, and they look away. They don't know why, but something in their body remembers. A flicker of discomfort, a shadow behind their smile. That is your mark. You pass a young girl crying outside a bakery, too thin, too alone. You stop, offer bread. She looks at you like a stray, suspicious but hungry. You say nothing. Place the food in her hand, walk away. That is your legacy, not charity. Witness, compassion without transaction, the kind you were rarely given. You walk past a villa where once, long ago, you were kept for 3 days by a man who called you his muse. He wept when you left, told you no woman had ever made him feel so seen. You hadn't spoken once. The villa is cracked now. Weeds grow between the tiles. You smile. Rome remembers its emperors in arches and marble. But you? You are remembered in habits, in echoes, in every woman who learns how to say no with her eyes before her mouth opens, in every man who hesitates before reaching out, in every child who grows up knowing that love is not always loud, and safety often wears the voice of a woman who has suffered enough to know what silence means. You walk until your feet ache. You sit near the forum, not in it, just outside, where the shadows are longer, You watch people move, hurrying, always hurrying. They don't see you. They don't see the woman near the arch, braiding her daughter's hair with fingers that once offered comfort to strangers. They don't see the man with a limp who once crawled to your door, weeping over a wife he betrayed and lost. They don't see the graffiti fading from the side of a wall where someone long ago wrote, "She held my sorrow and left me whole." You do. You see them all. Because your eyes have grown wise in places theirs refuse to look. You close your own for a moment and breathe. And in that breath, you remember everything. The girl you were, the woman you became, the stories you carried for others, the one you now carry for yourself. They say history forgets women like you, but they're wrong. History is made of women like you, built on your hands, your hips, your tears, your strength, written not in books, in bodies, in survival. In the soft resistance of waking each day, lighting a lamp and saying, "Still, I am here." You open your eyes. The sun is setting. You rise, not with effort, with grace, and walk home, wherever home now is, knowing that you were never truly lost. You were simply never written in their ink, but you were carved in stone, in breath, in memory, in Rome. And that is enough. It doesn't come with ceremony. There's no procession, no incense, no whispered blessings. You are not led to a soft bed surrounded by women who weep for your passing. There are no coins for the boatman, no sculpted urn with your name etched in careful Latin. No one will read poetry for you in the forum. There will be no eulogies, no mention of your life in records. You die as you lived, quietly. You feel it coming, though. Not all at once, but in waves, in the way your knees crackle now when you kneel by the fire. In the way sleep comes faster, stays longer, but never fully refreshes. In the way your breath shortens when you walk uphill. And the garden, once your sanctuary, now feels like an uphill climb. There's no illness to name, just the slow unwinding of a life that's carried too much, for too long. You don't fear it. You've lived through worse. The city nearly broke you. Men nearly erased you. Grief nearly devoured you. But none of them succeeded. So this is just another letting go. You begin to prepare, not out of fear, but out of gentleness. You start sorting your things. Not many remain. A comb worn smooth by decades of use. A scarf faded from lavender to near gray. The small clay figurine from the shrine of Venus Erycina, her curves softened by time and fingertips. The parchment with your daughter's name, written long ago in your own hand, then folded and kept safe in the seam of a tunic. You take each one. You touch them. You remember. And then you begin to pass them on. Not with words, with presence. You give the scarf to the girl who brings you bread each week. She doesn't ask why. She just holds it like it means something. You leave the comb on a windowsill near the river, wrapped in cloth, for a stranger. Someone will find it. Someone will wonder. You bury the figurine beneath the tree near your home. Not deep, just enough. A quiet offering to the God who listened when no one else did. And the parchment, you burn it. Not out of regret, out of release. Your daughter no longer needs it. She lives. You've seen her from a distance, tall. Sure, laughing in the market with a child of her own, never knowing that the old woman passing by is the reason she walks unburdened. That is enough. You've said your goodbye. You begin to slow even more. You no longer leave the house, not because you can't, because you don't need to. Everything that matters now is here, within reach. The morning light through the open shutters, the sound of the river at night, the way the birds chatter as if the world hasn't ended and never will. Marcia visits daily, brings soup, strokes your hair back with hands that don't tremble. She says little. She knows silence. You like that about her. One night, you speak more than usual. You tell her a story, not about your work, not directly. You speak of a girl who once walked through Rome barefoot, who learned the language of survival, who lit lamps for men who couldn't name their own loneliness. Marcia listens, doesn't interrupt. When you finish, she says, "She sounds like someone I would have liked." You say nothing, but you smile. And that is the last story you tell. Because the next day, you wake slower. Your breath catches, not painfully, just like a bird reluctant to fly. You drink water. You fold your blanket. You sit in the chair by the door and close your eyes. The sun kisses your skin. You listen to the wind. You think of Rome, not as it is now, but as it was. The streets alive with sound. The scent of oil and bread and skin. The laughter in back rooms. The whispers in the dark. You think of Gaia, of Livia, of the girls whose names are lost to time, but who once held your hand when it trembled. You think of the river, the shrine, the breath that came back to you when you thought it had gone for good. And then you exhale. Once, twice, then never again. It is not dramatic. It is not tragic. It is just quiet. Marcia finds you at dusk. She does not weep. She does not call for help. She covers you with the blanket. She lights the lamp. She sits beside you until morning. The city does not mark your passing. The world does not pause, but something shifts. Somewhere, a bird sings a note too sweet to be casual. Somewhere, a girl wakes with a strange feeling of calm. Somewhere, a man who never cried before places his head in his hands and weeps without knowing why. Because death is not absence, it is memory rearranged. You are not gone. You are soil now, and story. You're the scent of lavender in an alleyway no one remembers. You're the lamp that never stopped burning. You're the rhythm in a woman's voice when she says, enough. You're the silence that knows everything and forgives it anyway. There is no tomb, no name carved, no mourners. But there is something else. On the wall of a small house, someone writes in charcoal, "She was real." That is your epitaph. Not grand, not glorious, but true. And in a world that tried to forget you, truth is the rarest gift. You are not dust. You are history. You are not vanished. You are seed. And somewhere, someday, someone will walk the streets of Rome and feel your presence like the hush before rain. They will not know why they pause, why they breathe deeper, why they look toward the river and feel a longing they cannot name. But you will. You will be there, always, in the quiet, watching, remembering, at peace. You are dead. But only to those who look in haste. To those who measure existence by names on tombstones, by dates in records, by marble statues with empty eyes. To them, yes, you no longer exist. But to what pulses between the stones, to what whispers beneath the arches of Rome, to those who feel rather than just see, you are everywhere. It doesn't begin with your death. It begins with what remained. in the woman who now sits where you once sat, in the young girl who inherits the gesture you use to calm nervous clients, in the child who learns to hide a coin beneath her tongue, just as you taught. You became a code, a presence. You became a secret language of resistance. The city, in its haste, has no idea what it lets slip through. Rome changes like everything, but some things do not die. The orange blossom on the altar of a forgotten goddess, the fingernail mark on a wooden door frame, the letter never delivered, hidden beneath a stone. You, yes, you, the woman with no statue, no name in law, no official family. You are an echo in the guts of the world. And now it's time to tell how that echo grew. Those who came after, in the house that once was yours, Marcia continues to shelter women, one each season. They arrive broken, silent, distrustful, and leave after weeks or months with straighter shoulders, clearer eyes. None of them know your name, but they all find traces of you in the house, in the way the chair is placed by the window where one sees the bend of the river, in the clay bowl filled with dried lavender, which no one replaces but never loses its scent, in the way Marcia sets soup on the table, always 2 servings, even when there is only one woman there. When they ask, Marcia simply says, "She stayed here once," and that's enough. One of them, a girl named Antonia, finds beneath a loose floorboard a piece of cloth. Inside, an old coin and a strip of leather. A charm. She does not take it. She leaves it where it is. But at night, she sleeps with her hand under the board, just to feel that she's not alone. Another, with cropped hair, who does not speak or cry, spends a whole week cleaning the garden. On the final day, she plants a sprig of rosemary next to the tree where you were buried. She doesn't know, but something moved her to do it. 2, those who stayed behind in Rome. The House of Women goes on. It's not the same Lupinar, of course. The old building collapsed during a storm years after you left. But the women relocated. Licinia died, standing in the middle of the street, an apple in her hand, as if she forgot to finish her bite. Livia still lives. She walks more slowly, smiles less easily, but her eyes are just as sharp as ever. She is now the eldest. The reference, she sleeps early, speaks little, listens much. When a young girl arrives crying, Livia doesn't offer advice. She just sits beside her. And sometimes, in a whisper, she says she would have known what to do. No one needs to ask who she is. You became a sacred name, not spoken, but felt. At night, Livia sometimes lights an extra oil lamp and leaves it on the windowsill. Says it's so the wind knows there's room. The wind, which you knew so well. 3, those who never knew you. A scribe finds an old paper in the city's archives. It's not official, not cataloged. It's a list of female names. No surnames, no titles, no roles. Just names. And beside each, a line handwritten. She was here. She mattered. Your name is there. Not the one they used to summon you at night. The other one. The one you whispered to yourself during pain. The one only your mother knew. The scribe copies that name into a notebook. He doesn't know why. In the street, he sees a girl carrying water and wonders. Does she have a name? No one knows. The question follows him. And so, you change a man who never touched your skin, never heard your voice. But now, when he writes a woman's name, any name, he does it more gently. Aphoi, those who will come. 100 years later, Rome burns. The empire falters. Homes change. Languages blend. But there's a girl, born to a midwife in the outskirts, who hears a story from her grandmother. My grandmother knew a woman who saved others. She died near a river. They said she had eyes that saw into hearts. And she knew when it was time to stop. The girl grows and never forgets the story. When she begins to write, she invents a name for the woman. But the soul is yours. And there, in the middle of a text about battles and emperors, a paragraph appears about a woman no one names, but everyone feels. That paragraph survives. 200 years later, a monk copies it. He doesn't understand, but he preserves it. Centuries later, an archaeologist finds it and weeps, not knowing why. V, the body. Finally, at peacetime passes. More than you could have imagined. 1,000 years. 2,000. But beneath that tree, the earth still sings. Flowers grow with unusual strength. People stop there. They fall silent. They don't pray. They just feel. Some call it a sacred place. Others say a nameless saint rests there. Your name is forgotten. But you became permanence. Your pain became fertile soil. Your exhaustion became shelter. Your memory became ground. And the world moved on, but with a little more care, with a little more respect for the women without statues. Z. The final word. You never wanted eternity. You only wanted a room with a lock and a place to sleep without fear. But you got more. You became seed. You became echo. You became cycle. Today, when a woman anywhere in the world refuses to be silenced, a piece of you awakens. When a young girl learns to care for another, even one she doesn't know, you are reborn. You live in the eyes that recognize other people's pain. You live in the patience of those who wait, in the fury of those who do not accept, in the courage of those who stay, in the tenderness of those who leave. You live, not because your name is written, but because your story was felt. And in the end, that is what matters. You were woman. You were strength. You were flame. And like every flame that does not go out, you spread forever.